The billionaire had no idea the biggest gamble of his life was about to be undone by the daughter of his black chauffeur. The $5,000 poker chips trembled in Richard Sterling's perfectly manicured hands, his once smug expression now melting into disbelief as he stared at the 10-year-old girl seated across the polished mahogany table. He had wagered his Caribbean estate on a single hand, convinced this would be a lesson in humility for the driver's sassy little girl. But instead, the child's quiet confidence was slicing through his arrogance like a scalpel. "Are you sure you want to continue, Mr. Sterling?" asked Jade Williams, her voice steady and eerily calm, a sharp contrast to the panic flickering in his eyes. The grand Beverly Hills mansion fell into breathless silence. Around them, a circle of party guests, powerful tycoons, glossy celebrities, even a few crooked politicians, stood frozen, recognizing that something rare, something electric, was unfolding. A black girl from the suburbs was systematically dismantling one of the richest men in the United States. Just a few hours earlier, Jade had been doing long division in a notebook, waiting quietly in the kitchen. She had tagged along with her father, Thomas Williams, only because the babysitter hadn't shown up. But then she heard them, snide remarks, cruel jokes, whispered mockery from men with cigar-stained fingers and too much money. And something in her snapped. "Look, Williams," Sterling had said, his voice loud enough to make the champagne glasses rattle. "Your little girl thinks she knows poker because she saw it on TV. How about we teach her how the real world works?" What Sterling didn't know was that Jade had spent the last 3 years mastering advanced mathematical probability in a free online program for gifted children. He couldn't possibly imagine that this tiny girl in braids could calculate odds faster than most professional poker software. "My daughter isn't bothering anyone," Thomas had replied quietly, nervously twisting the keys in his callous hands. "Don't worry." Sterling had grinned, eyes gleaming with mischief. "Just a friendly game. If she wins, I'll double your salary. If she loses, you owe me an apology for raising a child who doesn't know her place." 45 minutes later, Sterling had already lost his yacht, his Aspen retreat, and now hovered over a final bet that might send his wife into cardiac arrest. Jade adjusted her cards with surgical precision, her deep brown eyes tranquil, eyes that had seen too much too early. "Last chance, Mr. Sterling," she said, sliding her chips toward the center. "But this time, when I win, I want something different." The room tensed. Sterling barked a laugh that echoed through the chandelier hall. "Something different, huh? Girl, you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." He gestured theatrically to the gawking crowd. "Come take a look, everyone. The chauffeur's kid thinks she can teach me poker." "Richard, don't be cruel," murmured his wife, Victoria, but the amusement in her voice betrayed any concern. "I understand perfectly," Jade responded, voice like a quiet blade. "You bet your Caribbean property because you assumed a black girl from the suburbs couldn't possibly understand poker." A hush rippled through the guests. Someone cleared their throat. Another looked away. Sterling just leaned in, eyes narrowing like a predator. "Exactly. And when you lose, I want your father to beg me for raising such an insolent girl." He turned toward Thomas, who stood stiff against the wall, humiliation etched into every line of his tired face. "Williams, your daughters are to learn that there are consequences for disrespect." What Richard Sterling couldn't see, what he never cared to see, was a quiet dignity of the man he mocked daily. Thomas Williams had once been an engineer, but years of subtle racism, doors slammed in his face and whispered not a good fit interviews had led him to this job, driving around powerful men who barely saw him as human. Jade had seen her father cry when he thought no one was watching. At 7, she found a worn library book on mathematical probability. By 8, she had memorized it. By 9, she was out-calculating poker bots. And now, here she was, facing down a billionaire and his ego. "I'd double the bet," Sterling growled, shoving a fresh stack of chips forward. "My Malibu estate, $15 million. He leaned in close, his blue eyes cold with entitlement. "And when you lose, I want your family gone. Pack up. Leave this town. Forever." Victoria gasped. "Richard, you can't be serious." "I'm very serious," he said, eyes never leaving Jade. "This is about respect. social hierarchy. He turned once more to Thomas. And you, Williams, should have taught your daughter better. She'll never survive in our world if she doesn't learn her place. For the first time that evening, Jade's face changed. Not with fear, not even anger. Something colder, sharper. The calm resolve of a child who had been silently preparing for this moment her whole life. I accept your terms, she said, folding her hands over the cards. But when I win, and I will win, I want you on your knees before my father. I want you to beg him for every humiliation you've inflicted over the past 5 years. Laughter exploded from the crowd. Margaret Ashworth, the senator's wife, doubled over, tears in her eyes. Oh my God, Richard, she thinks she's in a movie. But Jade didn't blink, and I want it recorded, posted on every one of your social media accounts, with a full explanation of how a 60-year-old man lost $15 million to a 10-year-old girl because he judged her intelligence based on her skin. The laughter stopped. Just like that. Silence. Complete and absolute. And now, the final hand was being dealt. Sterling's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. You, how dare you? Jay remained unshaken. I'm just stating the terms you propose, Mr. Sterling, she said with the calm precision of someone explaining arithmetic to a stubborn child. Unless you're afraid of losing to a 10-year-old black girl? A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Guests began shifting uncomfortably. The room that once buzzed with laughter and pride now teetered on the edge of disgrace. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was quickly becoming a public reckoning, a moment that could permanently stain Sterling's name. You're on, he spat, his voice low and bitter. But you'll learn that the real world isn't for dreamers like you. Jade didn't blink. She calmly arranged her cards, her fingers moving with precision of a pianist. Every motion was deliberate, every breath measured. Her mind raced, not with panic, but calculation. Sterling held kings and queens, a powerful hand by ordinary standards. But Jade wasn't ordinary. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but anticipation. Last chance to surrender, Sterling offered, the smugness curling back into his voice. You can walk away now. Just suffer a little embarrassment. Thanks for the offer, Jade said sweetly. But I think I'd rather stick around for the moment you realize that judging people by how they look is the most expensive mistake you've ever made. Sterling laid his cards down with theatrical confidence. 2 kings, 1 queen, and a glimmer of arrogance. A hand that could crush most players. But Jade didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled, a small, subtle expression that seemed to freeze time. It wasn't the grin of a child enjoying a game. It was the quiet storm of someone who knew what was coming. And when Sterling saw that smile, something uneasy stirred in his chest. He ignored it, brushing it off as bravado. She's bluffing. Has to be. But she wasn't. Jade slowly turned her cards over, one by one, like a magician revealing the final trick. 5 of diamonds, 6 of diamonds, 7, 8, 9, a straight flush, one of the rarest, deadliest hands in the game. Probability? About 0.0014%. The room fell still. Sterling blinked rapidly, as if willing the sight away, but the card stayed put. The red in his face drained like wine from a broken glass. That's impossible, he whispered, voice hollow. A child can't. A child can't what, Mr. Sterling? Jade asked gently, arranging her hand into perfect symmetry on the felt. Can't count cards? Can't calculate odds? Or can't be smarter than a rich white man? Victoria Sterling raised both hands to her face, staring in disbelief at her husband and the flawless flush before them. Margaret Ashworth, who'd been laughing hysterically moments before, suddenly looked as though she'd swallowed her own tongue. But Jade wasn't finished. What no one here knows, she said, rising from her chair, her gaze fixed on Sterling, is that I didn't just spend the last 3 years studying math online. I found something much deeper, something that changed how I see the world and the people in it. Her voice softened, but it commanded the entire room. Dad, she said, her eyes never leaving Sterling. Do you remember the night you came home crying? The night he humiliated you in front of the other drivers. Thomas shifted, startled. His hands curled into fists as memories he tried to bury clawed their way back to the surface. Jade, there's no need. Yes, she said firmly. There is. The guests leaned in, drawn to the truth rising in her voice. You thought I was asleep, Jade continued, but I heard you in the bathroom. You were crying because Mr. Sterling told you that people like us should be grateful just to clean up after people like him. Sterling's mouth opened, ready to interrupt, but Jade raised her hand, an act so confident, so authoritative, it silenced him. That night, she continued, I turned on the computer in the library. I started researching you, Mr. Sterling, your businesses, your homes, your habits. The color drained from Sterling's face again, this time faster. He looked around the room, suddenly aware of how still everyone had become. I found out you have a weakness, gambling, and a tendency to underestimate anyone you consider beneath you. She stepped away from the table and walked toward the grand bookshelf lining the wall. Behind a row of dusty novels, she pulled out a slim tablet. I also took the liberty of recording our game. The gasp from the crowd was audible. Sterling stiffened, mouth half open. You didn't? I did, she replied, tapping the screen. A video appeared. 45 minutes of footage showing a powerful white billionaire gambling away his empire to a 10-year-old girl. The audio was crystal clear. Every racist comment, every degrading demand, every threat. The crowd watched, riveted and horrified. Sterling's own voice echoed through the room like a ghost. You people should know your place. When you lose, I want your father to apologize for raising you. Leave town when I win. Victoria turned to her husband, eyes wide, trembling. Richard! Tell me she's lying. But Jade wasn't done. The most interesting part, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice now as sharp as shattered glass, is that you've been doing this for years. You insult your employees. You place irresponsible bets. And you always underestimate the people you think are beneath you. Thomas stepped forward, his eyes glossy, his throat tight. Jade, how did you... Do you remember Dr. Peterson? She asked, still looking at Sterling. The college math professor who tutors me online? Thomas nodded slowly. Yes, Dad, Jade said softly. He's been training me for 2 years. Not just in math, but in strategy, behavioral psychology, and decision science. She turned back to Sterling. I knew every move you were going to make before you made it. Your body language, your betting patterns, your ego. Sterling could no longer meet her gaze. He looked shattered, stripped of his wealth, his power, and now, his dignity. I didn't come here to humiliate you, Mr. Sterling, Jade said gently. I came here to make sure my father never has to bow his head again. And in that moment, silence settled over the room like a final judgment. For the first time that evening, Jade allowed herself a genuine smile. It wasn't triumphant or cruel. It was calm, measured, a smile that came not from winning, but from vindication. Dr. Peterson specializes in game theory and behavioral analysis, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a razor. Over the last 6 months, I've studied not just poker rules, but the psychological patterns of arrogant players, especially those like Mr. Sterling. Thomas blinked. The name Dr. Peterson rang a bell. He was a retired college professor who had quietly dedicated his time to tutoring gifted kids from underprivileged communities. Jade had mentioned him before, but Thomas had assumed the lessons were purely academic. He had no idea that his daughter had been studying psychological warfare. Dr. Peterson taught me something valuable, Jade continued, addressing the room, but fixing her eyes on Sterling. Men like you follow very predictable patterns. You bet big when you feel superior, especially against women and minorities. You make humiliating offers because you think intimidation equals power. And most of all, she paused, letting the moment hang, you underestimate people who don't look like you. Sterling tried to speak, but only a strangled rasp came from his throat. His throat bobbed, but no words followed. But most importantly, Jade added, tapping the tablet again, he taught me to document everything. The room shifted again, a collective inhale held tight in their chests. All of our sessions, Jade explained, have been recorded. Every conversation, every strategy meeting. including the public charity games you played. We studied you. We identified how your body reacts when you start losing. Your eyes, your posture, your nervous tics. Margaret Ashworth turned pale. She leaned toward her husband and whispered frantically, "We need to leave. Now." "Don't go anywhere," Jade said coolly, without raising her voice. "Because you all laughed. When Mr. Sterling made racist jokes about my family, you laughed. When he humiliated a 10-year-old girl, you smirked. So now you'll stay and watch how it ends." Jade returned to the tablet and pulled up another screen. "This is my social media page. I have over 50,000 followers, mostly math students, educators, and people interested in exposing systemic prejudice." Then, with a tap, she brought up a live feed. "And this is a live stream. It began exactly when our poker game started." A collective gasp swept through the room. Sterling's jaw locked. His hands trembled. "You can't. That's blackmail," he blurted. "No." Jade corrected him gently. "This is documentation of a power imbalance, of a racial and class-based humiliation. It's content for a case study, the kind Dr. Peterson encourages us to share to bring awareness to systemic injustice." Thomas stared at his daughter in awe and unease. He had raised a brilliant child, but only now did he see the full extent of what she had prepared. "How many people are watching?" Victoria asked, her voice unsteady. Jade glanced at the screen. 17,400, she said evenly, and growing. The stream's being shared across multiple platforms. "It's trending." Sterling suddenly erupted. "End this. Right now. You have no idea what you're doing. I have lawyers. I have power. I can destroy your family." "With what money, Mr. Sterling?" Jade asked innocently, tilting her head. "Because after tonight, you owe me $15 million. And based on your last 2 years of gambling losses, I'm guessing your accounts are looking pretty dry." At that moment, Sterling's phone began to buzz on the table. Then again, and again, a flurry of calls flooded in. 1, then 2, then 5 all at once. "I think your investors are calling," Jade said casually. "Dr. Peterson warned me this would happen, that when men in power are publicly exposed, the financial fallout is immediate." Sterling grabbed the phone, fumbling with the screen. He answered a call, voice shaking. The caller's voice, loud and panicked, was clearly audible in the quiet room. "Richard, what the hell is going on? Half our clients are pulling contracts after seeing you gamble against a child on a live stream." Sterling mumbled an explanation, but the desperation was thick in his voice. He sounded nothing like the man who had barked orders and sneered at a little girl 45 minutes ago. When he finally ended the call, Jade's voice was soft but firm. "Mr. Sterling, would you like to review the terms of our agreement? When I won, and I did win, you would kneel before my father and apologize publicly, and that apology would be posted on all your social media accounts." The silence that followed was louder than any outburst. Sterling's phone continued to buzz like an angry hive. The eyes of the room bore down on him with pity, disgust, and horror. And through it all, Jade stood like still water, calm, collected, a storm beneath the surface. But those who truly looked into her eyes would see what Sterling had failed to see until it was too late. The fire forged by years of quiet injustice. The intelligence, precision, and dignity of someone who had waited patiently for her moment. A moment when intellect would slice through arrogance like glass through silk. "Mr. Sterling," she said again, her tone now chilling in its calm, "will you honor our bet? Or would you prefer to explain to your board of directors why you're breaking a legal agreement on a live stream witnessed by thousands?" Sterling's eyes darted wildly, like a trapped animal. Victoria had buried her face in her hands. Margaret had crept to the far edge of the room. And Thomas Williams. He stood motionless, his chest heavy with both fear and awe at what his daughter had unleashed. This is madness," Sterling muttered. "You're just a little girl." "A little girl," Jade echoed, "who just beat you fairly in a legal poker game, in front of 8 witnesses, on a live stream." She leaned slightly closer, her voice dropping just enough to be intimate and final. And now the world is watching. Jade barely glanced up as her tablet chimed. "Check the screen," she said, calm as ever. "We're at 23,400 viewers live." Sterling's phone rang again. His hand trembled as he picked it up. "Hello." His voice cracked. "Richard, it's Peterson from the board. What the hell are you doing?" The voice was sharp, irate, and loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "The phones won't stop ringing. Clients are pulling out. Shareholders are furious. You have 1 hour to fix this, or we're voting you out immediately." Sterling hung up and turned to Jade, eyes blazing with hatred. "You have no idea what you've just done. I'm going to sue you. I'll bury your family in court." "With what lawyers?" Jade replied sweetly. "Because I imagine your funds will be tied up for a while once the $15 million is transferred to my account." Before he could respond, Jade's tablet pinged again. She glanced at it and smiled. "Oh, how interesting. Dr. Peterson just sent me an update." She turned the screen toward Sterling. "The Securities and Exchange Commission has officially launched an investigation into your companies thanks to our live stream. Something about irresponsible gambling with corporate assets." Sterling's skin turned ghost gray. "That's impossible. They can't. They can, and they are." Jade swiped the screen. "The video's already been shared 3,200 times in the past 2 hours. It has 57,000 views. And what a surprise, your name is trending on Twitter." Sterling lunged forward, trying to grab the tablet. Jade gently pulled it back. She said, her tone almost playful. "We haven't completed our agreement yet." She smiled. "Remember the deal? You kneel before my father and apologize for every humiliation. Publicly." "Never," Sterling hissed through gritted teeth. "That's okay," Jade replied cheerfully. Dr. Peterson explained that when someone refuses to honor a public agreement, especially one involving racial discrimination, civil penalties tend to be, how did he say it? Oh, yes, astronomically expensive. The phone on the table exploded again. More calls, more chaos. Victoria finally looked up from where she'd been frozen in silence. "Richard," she said, her voice cracked and desperate. "Just do what she asks, before this completely destroys us." "She's right." Margaret Ashworth whispered from the far corner. "My husband called me. Our friends are already distancing themselves. No one wants to be tied to this." Sterling turned to Thomas, searching for a lifeline. "Williams, you know I've always treated you well." Thomas looked up slowly, his voice thick with years of quiet endurance. "Treated me well? You made me work holidays without pay. You called me boy when I was 45. You told me, in front of others, that I should be grateful to clean your car. That's what you call respect." Jade's eyes flared with quiet steel. She stepped closer. "Dr. Peterson taught me something important, Mr. Sterling. Men like you only understand two things: financial consequences and public humiliation." She tapped her screen again. Transmission still active. Audience now, 31,000. "Oh, look, 3 national news networks just reached out. They want interviews." Sterling collapsed into a chair, his face pale, sweat pooling at his brow. His bluster had drained completely. What you want from me?" "Exactly what we agreed," Jade said calmly. "You get down on your knees. You apologize to my father. I record it, and you post it on all of your social media platforms with a full statement." "And if I do that," he asked desperately, "you'll stop the stream?" Jade tilted her head thoughtfully. "The stream ends when the agreement is fulfilled. But the internet," she shrugged, "it never forgets." Sterling turned to Victoria. She simply shook her head and looked away. Margaret wouldn't meet his eyes. No one would. Finally, with jerky, mechanical movements, Richard Sterling rose. His body seemed to resist every step he took. "Thomas," he said, voice breaking, I'm so sorry." "On your knees," Jade said, her voice ironclad. "As agreed." Sterling froze, but he knew there was no way out. Trembling, he slowly dropped to the floor and knelt before Thomas Williams. His eyes welled with tears, not from regret, but from absolute humiliation. Thomas Williams, he said, voice cracking. I apologize for treating you with disrespect, for racial discrimination, for... He paused, choking back sobs. Continue, Jade said, recording every word. For the comments about your family not knowing its place, for the public humiliations, for using my power to belittle a man who was better than me. The moment he finished, Jade stopped the recording, uploaded it, and tapped a button. Done, she said. Deal closed. Sterling stayed on his knees, completely broken, as his phone erupted with a barrage of notifications, comments, reposts, reactions. Within minutes, the video of the once mighty billionaire kneeling in disgrace was viral. How? He whispered. How could a 10-year-old girl? Dr. Peterson taught me that intelligence has no age, Mr. Sterling, and underestimating someone because of how they look is always the first mistake of the arrogant. Jade turned, gently taking her father's hand. Let's go home, Dad. You don't work here anymore. Wait! Sterling cried, still kneeling. You can't leave me like this. Jade turned one last time at the door. Her voice was low and final. Mr. Sterling, you bet that a black girl from the suburbs couldn't be smarter than a rich white man. You lost. Now face the consequences like a man. As father and daughter walked out of the mansion, the phone inside continued to ring in a futile frenzy. Victoria had locked herself away. Margaret had slipped out the back. And Richard Sterling was left alone on the marble floor of the empire he'd just gambled away. Outside, Thomas squeezed Jade's hand as they approached the car. Tomorrow, she said softly, we find a labor lawyer. Dr. Peterson said that publicly proven discrimination leads to very generous settlements. Thomas laughed, a real, deep, freeing laugh. My daughter, how did you plan all this? Dr. Peterson always says the best revenge against injustice is to use the system against those who abuse it. Sterling bet on his own arrogance. I just gave him the rope. As Thomas drove away from the mansion for the last time as a chauffeur, Jade sat in the back seat, watching her tablet. The video had surpassed 100,000 views. 3 major networks had confirmed interviews, and 7 companies had reached out offering jobs to Thomas Williams, the man known now as the father of the genius girl who took down a billionaire. But as they drove into the night, one question remained. What would Jade Williams do next? Dr. Peterson had once told her, geniuses don't stop at one victory. They build empires. And for Jade, this was only the opening move. 6 months later, Thomas Williams sat in his corner office on the 15th floor of a downtown skyscraper. The plaque on the door read, Thomas Williams, Director of Human Resources, Morrison & Associates. The man who once chauffeured billionaires now shaped hiring policies at one of the region's largest firms. 3 more interview requests came in, Jade said, walking in with a stack of envelopes. Now 11, she had moved beyond poker. Her online math academy for underprivileged children had grown to over 5,000 students. And Sterling? Thomas asked, though he already knew. Jade scanned her screen. Bankrupt. Mansion auctioned. Victoria filed for divorce and moved to France. His companies collapsed. Margaret Ashworth lost her board seat. She smiled. Dr. Peterson, and I turned the case into a national movement. 17 million views. Dozens of new discrimination complaints are being filed across the country. We're building something real. At that moment, the phone rang. Jade glanced at the caller ID and raised an eyebrow. Sterling. She answered and put on speaker. I need a job, his voice croaked. Anything. I've lost everything. Thomas didn't hesitate. Our company conducts full background checks, including social media. We have entry-level janitorial positions. Minimum wage. No benefits. 6 a.m. start. I'll take it, Sterling muttered. After she hung up, Jade leaned back and smiled. Looks like he finally understands social hierarchy. Thomas chuckled. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, he said, watching traffic below. It's building something so big they become irrelevant. That night, they sat down for dinner in their modest apartment. Despite the money, they'd chosen not to move. Jade had her reasons. "Thank you," she said softly, "for teaching me that being underestimated is a superpower. Arrogant people always reveal their weaknesses to those they think don't matter. And what did you learn?" Thomas asked. "That intelligence without character is just cunning. But intelligence with purpose," she smiled, "that can change the world." Today, Richard Sterling works as a night janitor. He earns in a month what he once spent on wine. Jade's story is taught in classrooms. Her movement redefines corporate equity. And the lesson? The powerful only remain powerful when they underestimate the rest. But when one person decides enough is enough, not even billions can protect arrogance from its own downfall.